Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rach, and I'm joined by my guest, David Brunel Bretman. Welcome to the show, David.
Hi, Rach. Thank you so much for having me on. I got to say at the top here, I'm a huge fan of the show, love what you do, and so really, really honored to be on the show.
Well then, David, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with Powered by the Apocalypse? How did you get your start? What was your gateway drug?
I'm actually relatively new to all of this. I've actually only been playing role-playing games regularly for a couple of years, and Powered by the Apocalypse games for slightly less time than that. The first Powered by the Apocalypse game that I encountered was actually Dungeon World, which I came across in like mid-2017, so really, really pretty recently. I was actually looking around for D&D DMing advice, and I came across somewhere somebody saying, oh, well, the best Dungeons & Dragons advice for running a game is actually from this entirely different game that uses this entirely different system, Dungeon World. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll check that out. And so I found the book, cracked it open, read through that, and it kind of blew my mind coming from this very, very traditional role-playing experience. Fast forward a little bit, around the end of 2017, the first PBTA game that I actually got to sit down and play was actually The Warren. And I played a game of that with some folks where we had to escape from Central Park in New York City up to the Bronx in order to avoid construction that was happening there. And ended up... We hijacked one of those horse carriages that they have in Central Park.
Oh, yeah, I know the ones.
I'm in New York. This was a bunch of New Yorkers, and we're sort of, looking over the play materials, and there's this park play set, and we're like, oh, yeah, this is Central Park. We're just going to do Central Park. And I think we were actually playing, now that I think about it, literally across the street from the park where we decided to set the game. And of course, for anybody who doesn't know, the Warren is the one where you're rabbits.
Yes, it's the Watership Down game, but not Watership Down.
Right.
Actually, that might pull into our topic later on when we get into your game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's move on to the first segment of the show, Read a Sitch, where David and I will discuss some aspect of Powered by the Apocalypse play that he feels should get a little bit more of a spotlight.
Read a Sitch.
David, I asked you, what off the top of your head do you think we don't talk about a lot in the community? And you came back with a really interesting answer.
Something that I'm interested in, and that I became interested in specifically developing this Powered by the Apocalypse Harry Potter game, is the idea of emergent mysteries. So obviously there are a lot of games out there that use the idea of a mystery. And, you have your things like Monster of the Week, where there are all these moves that are specifically centered around, okay, how do you solve a mystery? How do you get information? How do you kind of unravel what's going on? And so from the player's side, that all works very well when you're trying to get at something that the MC has already done some degree of prep work to come up with. But that's the hitch, right? The MC has to do some kind of prep work in most Powered by the Apocalypse games in order to get the mystery. I became very interested in the idea of improvisational games, which is something that Powered by the Apocalypse really excels at, and one of the reasons that I'm so interested in the systems is this emergent narrative thing, this play to find out what happens. But when you look at the tools that you have to actually create mysteries, it's hard to make an emergent mystery. It's hard to make something that feels cohesive and coherent, and where it feels like you're tugging on threads and uncovering information and kind of unraveling what's going on in a way that's satisfying, but also comes out of improvisational emergent gameplay. So I started doing some research and I started asking around, and I ended up on the storygames.com forums. Some folks over there recommended to me a game that was completely unpublished and only existed in Swedish.
What?
Called Nerves of Steel. This is a noir mystery game. And fortunately, you can actually now get this game in translation. The thread, eventually, they were able to rope in the designer of the game, and he posted about it, and somebody was able to actually translate it. So you can actually, if you do a little hunting around, look it up, because the system is very cool. Nerves of Steel.
What is it about Nerves of Steel that loans itself to making you think differently about making a mystery empowered by the apocalypse?
Yeah, so what I stole specifically, and I'm probably going to use that word a lot, because designing this game was just about like going through lots and lots of other games and finding the most interesting parts and repurposing them to suit my needs. There is a question system in that game that I repurposed for the Hogwarts game. And I think it can be repurposed for pretty much any Powered by the Apocalypse game where you want to develop a mystery. The system is pretty simple. You can sort of bake it into your MC prep when you're thinking about stuff like threats or fronts, or even, which is the big advantage of it, when you're like sitting at the table with your players and you're trying to sort of get to, okay, what comes next? And the system is to simply write down questions. So in the Hogwarts game, I call these mysteries or mystery questions. And the idea is simply when you reach the end of a scene or a session, depending on how you're feeling it, you step back for a moment, and as a group, everybody at the table, players and MC included, says, okay, what are the mysteries that we came across in this scene? And you write those down as your sort of basic journalism questions, you know, your who, what, where, why, when, how type questions. And what this does, I think is so cool, is you can have a scene that is totally emergent. You're driving the scene based on your playbooks, what your characters want. You're driving the scene based on how the moves shake out. You're driving the scene based on what MC moves you choose to play to react. You know, you're doing all your normal Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. Whatever happens in the scene, you can pull back and you say, okay, what were the things in that scene that were weird or interesting or compelling in some way? What are the things that our characters want to know based on how that scene shook out? And then you have this question list that you develop. And what you can do with that question list is you can look at it and then you can say, oh, okay, here's a thread for a mystery. Here's an interesting item that we came across. Here's something of note. And you can start to tug on that. And you can use that to say, okay, well, where's our next scene set? Or when you make a move as an MC, you can reference back to that question. And because everybody at the table knows, okay, this is the thing that we're trying to solve, this is the thing that we're focused on, you can actually get really satisfying emergent mysteries. The mechanism is really simple. What you do is when you solve a mystery, you cross it off the list. So as long as you are adding mysteries and crossing mysteries off, eventually you're going to get to a place where through emergent gameplay, you've answered all the questions, or you've answered enough questions that it feels like you've made a satisfying story, but you don't have to plan it out in advance.
Have you found that you might try to seed a scene and put something you feel is compelling for your players to latch onto, and they latch onto something completely unrelated?
Oh, yeah, all the time. And I quite frankly, I love that. That's actually one of my favorite things. One of the things that I found in general emceeing, and one of the reasons that this question thing works so well, is players, especially when they're in a mystery mindset, do not tolerate red herrings. If you attempt to throw a red herring in, your players will always follow the red herring. Your brain is a pattern-making machine. Human beings want to make patterns out of things. We don't like information that doesn't fit or is isolated, especially when we are in this mode of, again, like we're already thinking in terms of mysteries. So players will always pick up on the little details and go in crazy directions. And quite frankly, that's the fun of it, is when a player says, oh, hey, this thing over here, that thing is super interesting. I want to know about that. And you're like, oh, okay, I had no idea you were going to do that, but heck yeah, let's go with it. So I'm talking very abstractly. I feel like I should give some kind of concrete examples here.
Yeah, do you have an example from play that you can think of off the top of your head?
I ran an installment of this Hogwarts game. You start out, you just ask the players, where do you want to start? What's the scene? And they chose the Christmas feast at Hogwarts, which happens every year. So we started out there. One of the other procedures in the game is you say, okay, what is a strange or unexpected thing that happens here? Threw the question to the players, and they came back with one of them cut into a fish, and there was a coin in the fish. So, going back to your mystery questions, boom, now you have a mystery, right? How did the coin get in the fish? Who put it there? Where does it come from? And that ended up spinning out into a whole plot. And every scene, we just kept running the question method based on what happened previously. Okay, the coin leads to them going to the library. In the library, they find some information that is related to it. There's other weird events in the library. What are those related to? Oh, well, it's ghosts. You can just sort of follow these threads from one to one to one. Or, sometimes they spiderweb out into a whole bunch of different things. That's the sort of way that it sort of rolls through, just by these little bits of random stuff that take on significance as soon as you start to interrogate them and ask questions about them.
That's a really interesting way of addressing mysteries. I'm thinking about running Monster of the Week in the next few weeks, and I really want to sit back and go look over Nerves of Steel and see what I can do to make that game a little bit more robust and compelling at the table.
Yeah, I would give it a shot. I'm in a Monster of the Week game now. It would be very easy to essentially disclaim a bunch of the decision-making about what the monster is off onto the players just by saying, okay, what are the clues that you find? And then pull back, ask the questions. And as the MC, sort of sitting back and looking over the questions and seeing, okay, the players are interested in this item and this item. What do those two questions together tell me about the nature of this monster? You can sort of start to build from there. So I'd be very interested to see how it goes. I haven't tried it myself. Yeah, I'm going to have to do it too now, obviously.
That leads us to our next segment, Open Your Brain, where David and I are going to discuss his new game he's launched. And based on some of the comments in the last segment, some of you may have put together what this game is about.
Open your brain.
David, lead us into it.
I have designed a game called Hogwarts, an RPG. If you know anything about Harry Potter, you may have guessed a Harry Potter-themed RPG.
What?
I know. It's hard to unravel, but that's what it is. So I've designed a streamlined, powered by the apocalypse Harry Potter RPG. The entire game is oriented around allowing players to be students at Hogwarts and play through the sorts of stories that you see in the books and the films, get at a little bit of the relationship dynamics that you see amongst the different characters as they're in school, and do all your favorite Hogwarts stuff, sneaking around after hours, casting spells, getting into places that you're not supposed to be in the castle, and generally doing things that are just terribly unsafe for children, but very, very fun.
So based on the name and your description, people who are familiar with the Harry Potter universe are going to know it's quite large and vast, and there's a lot of side stories now. What part of that universe does the game specifically focus on? I mean, could I play anything from the setting, or is it specifically the boarding school adventures?
Yeah, it really is. I wanted to make sure that the game was focused. I think one of the major advantages of designing a game on top of the Apocalypse engine is that you do get things that are really thematically tight and thematically focused, and that get you to sort of specificity of experience, to be pretentious about it. As a new designer, this is the first Powered by the Apocalypse game I have attempted. It is the first, for lack of a better word, quote-unquote full game, even though if you do go and download it, you will see that the entire game is 17 pages. It's a very small thing.
It wouldn't kill a tree to print it out.
It would not kill a tree to print it out, though I think given the number of times over playtesting and the various iterations that I have done of it, I may have killed at least one whole tree, or possibly more, just printing playtest materials. But that's neither here nor there. You won't kill a tree if you print it out to play with your friends. I want this to be a very tight, focused experience, and that's why I chose the title Hogwarts, as opposed to saying that this is a general Harry Potter RPG, or this is a Wizarding World RPG, or what have you. Because I really want the experience to be focused on, okay, what is it to be a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? And what are the tropes from the books that we all like about that? And how can I create rules that get the fiction of that specific experience? So I think it's definitely a stronger game for being more tightly focused and not really worrying about the broader setting. Though obviously, there's all kinds of things you can bring in from the broader setting. If there's certainly lore and stuff that you can bring into whatever story it is that you create. But again, the experience is really focused on Hogwarts.
In what ways are the mechanics different in Hogwarts than, say, Apocalypse World?
Going back to the idea of sort of streamlining, making sure everything is a very tight, specific experience, there's a whole bunch of Apocalypse World stuff that I cut out entirely. I think the one that probably throws people who are super familiar with PBTA games the most is that there are no playbooks in this. It has what is a bit more of a traditional style of character sheet, and everybody is essentially playing the same playbook. You're a student. I wanted everybody to sort of be on the same playing field in this. Mm-hmm. What playbooks are really good at is asymmetry and tropes and trying to get at different sorts of characters. And there certainly are different sorts of characters in Harry Potter, in the source fiction, right? But a lot of the way that the themes of the books are and the way that the characters are structured in the books don't really lend themselves to kind of pigeonholing. And I felt like I would really restrict players if I locked them into different kinds of playbooks. One of the things that's very important in the universe and very important in the game is houses. And so you might say, oh, well, why wouldn't you just have a playbook for each house? But if you actually go and you look at the text, if you look at the films, if you look at the books, your house is not your destiny. It's something that culturally, I think, amongst Harry Potter fans, and quite frankly, that's a massive swath of the population, so amongst the general population, has become, super important. What house are you?
Yeah, it's like a geek identifying thing.
Right. Immediately. Rach, what house are you?
I'm Slytherin.
Boom. Instant answer. I am Ravenclaw. This is something that we have, inherent deep knowledge of. But people aren't so easily reducible, and I don't think your characters should be so easily reducible because they're not in the books. One of the things that I find really fascinating about the sort of main trio, they're all Gryffindors, right? Harry, Ron, Hermione.
Yeah, the protagonist house.
Right, the protagonist house. But Harry is kind of a Slytherin. And, you know, you look at the first time that you see the Sorting Hat, in that first Sorting Hat scene, he almost gets sorted into Slytherin. But ultimately, he makes a decision to go on a different path. Ron is kind of a Hufflepuff. He's a very loyal character. He's a character who's sort of this thick and thin friend. Hermione is kind of a Ravenclaw, right? She's intellectual. She's always in the library. She's the very type A student. But at the same time, all three of them have this overriding Gryffindor property of bravery. And I wanted to make room in the game for characters that operate like that. So your traits, and I refer to stats in the game specifically as traits because I want you to get in the mindset of these actually describe your character. These actually define them and describe what they're like as an individual. And so your traits can be whatever. And each of the traits in the game is specifically themed to one of the virtues of the houses. You can be a Hufflepuff who is very cunning, which is traditionally a Slytherin trait, right? And I want that to be a valid choice for people. And I didn't want a game where the playbooks would be fighting against that.
David, what's your favorite move in the game and why?
I have two answers. I have a secret favorite move.
Secret.
And I have an actual favorite move. Or rather, I have a written favorite move and I have an unwritten favorite move. This kind of segs from the previous question about what's different in this game from Apocalypse World. One of the other things that I did to streamline was to get rid of all of the peripheral moves or special moves, as they're called in some PBTA games. There was a page at one point in one version of the game that was peripheral moves, and it was all of your housekeeping stuff and all of the kind of mechanical stuff that you mess around with on your sheet as the game flows back and forth. And at some point I realized, okay, you know what? I can probably tighten this up enough that I can just put all this information on your character sheet, on the first playbook sheet. And you don't actually need another move sheet, and you don't actually really need to think of these as moves. But they are moves, and they're built like moves, and I, as a designer, think of them as moves. So, secret favorite move, because it is not written it's not listed as a move, though you will see in the play materials when it comes up, it is written in the style of a move, is clearing a condition. One of the other things that I stole that I really love is the condition system from Masks, which really gets to the core of a lot of Harry Potter fiction. So the condition system is basically, in this game, you don't have harm, you don't have hit points, anything like that. There's no harm clocks. What you have are conditions. And so conditions are negative states that your character might experience in the game. And as the MC, when a move allows me to make a hard move, I can give your character a condition. And conditions are sort of emotional states. They're things like angry or stressed or jealous. And there are also a couple of physical conditions as well, like injured. But in general, the emotional conditions, you get them, and then in order to clear them, you have to essentially give in to the condition. You have to give in to that negative emotion, that sort of darker aspect of yourself. And when you do that, the condition clears. It's a way to essentially get characters to operate in ways that are interesting to the story, but that are like non-optimal. get them to act in ways that are selfish or destructive, because you see that in the Harry Potter stories. You see these big falling outs between Harry and Ron where they have these large fights, right? Mm-hmm. And then they resolve it. And so the game should model that, and that should be a core part of the game. So that's the origin of the condition system. I love the way that works narratively. So the conditions move actually is written. When you have a condition, you can clear it by giving into the condition in the following ways, and then you would have the list. That's how it would actually be written as a move. However, there is one other way that you can clear a condition, which is to comfort or support someone. So you can either give into the condition, or another player can clear your condition by comforting or supporting you. So you can either get into that sort of like negative, more dramatic play where people are kind of giving in to their darker sides, or you can all kind of come together as a group and you can clear each other's conditions by essentially being good friends to each other. So that's the secret favorite move. It is not listed on the move sheet. The actual written favorite move that I've got in the game is gotta be hide and sneak. It's not that the move itself is particularly innovative or does anything that you wouldn't expect. Hide and sneak reads, when you want to hide yourself or something else, try to move around unnoticed, or otherwise hide and sneak about, roll plus cunning. On a 10 plus, you do it. On a 7 to 9, there are some drawbacks where you might almost kind of get detected or you leave evidence. And what I like about the move is, again, not the structure, it's just that in gameplay, it gets so Harry Potter. There's so much of those stories that are sneaking around the castle after hours, going into somewhere you're not supposed to be, trying to hide something from a teacher, trying to get some object that you're not supposed to have. And so whenever that move comes up in play, things just start to feel super Potter, which is why I like it so much.
It was definitely one of the moves that grabbed me off the sheet, because that's very much teenage shenanigans in a piece of genre fiction.
Yep, exactly. It's really what you want. It was one of the moves that I shifted things around throughout development. Things came in and out. That one was there from the start, and it's there at the end. It just feels right.
I think that's a great note to end on.
It is time to act under fire.
And now we're moving into the final segments of the show, Act Under Fire, where David and I will play a short little bit of Hogwarts to give you all a taste of how the game runs.
Okay, why don't we start off with Rach, if you could introduce your character that you've created for this little scenario, please.
Oh, God. So, given this is the fanfic game,
yes,
I took my fanfic-y character from Urban Shadows. If you've ever heard me talking in previous episodes about my Urban Shadows character, that character is actually Curtis Scanlon, who is in this alternate timeline, because that's going to be a thing, a Hufflepuff as per Randomly Rolling. He is got a pale complexion, brown hair, kind of a thin, skitty frame, underdeveloped teenage boy on the younger end. He is a second year at Hogwarts, half-blood with a second-hand wand made of elm.
Great. Let me throw you another question to start out with. What time of year do you think it is at Hogwarts?
Let's go with fall. Fall's very pretty. Lots
Great.
of churning leaves.
Yeah, so we open on a view of Hogwarts Castle. It's fall time. The Forbidden Forest is all red and gold foliage. We see some kids starting to get into their first Quidditch practice, one of the early scrimmages of the season off to the side, as we sort of move across the grounds and towards the towers of the castle. We're going to go in through one of the windows of one of the towers, sort of in the middle, and we are in a classroom. Your typical Hogwarts classroom, stone, Gothic architecture, these big, high, arched windows. We have a couple of rows of desks with the professor's desk up at the front of the room. What class is this?
Well, based on my comments about my favorite class, this is definitely Defense Against the Dark Arts. I mean, what possibly could go wrong?
Yeah, okay. So we are in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, second year. We'll say the professor of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class is Professor Dubois. And Professor Dubois is up at the front of the class going on about, let's say, boggarts, sort of giving a lecture to the class about their nature and what they're about, and he's a little long-winded, a bit of an older guy. It's not necessarily the most scintillating part of your Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Curtis, I imagine you're sitting there, you're waiting for the practical part of the class to kick in.
Yeah, Curtis is leafing kind of through the pages that we haven't reached yet in class and taking a sneak at what's coming up and hoping and praying that it gets a lot more compelling because the content's so good. Just this professor does not know how to deliver it at all.
No, it's kind of unfortunate. But as the professor's going on and as you're leafing through your book, one of your friends who's in the row behind you, Curtis, kind of reaches over and taps you on the shoulder and sort of leans in. Psst, Curtis.
So who is this friend of mine?
Well, I could ask you the same question. Who do you think this friend is?
Let's go with Derek. We're going to steal another name from another character. This is Derek.
Okay, fantastic. We have Derek leaning in and tapping you on the shoulder. Psst, Curtis.
What is it? Can't you see I'm trying to, stay on the ball here?
Yeah, I see you're reading stuff that the professor's not even talking about.
It's going to be good, I promise.
Hey, listen. Did you hear about Finnegan?
Have I heard about Finnegan? Is that something I can roll on?
Yeah, sounds like you want to roll to gain some knowledge. So give me a roll plus intellect, please.
So plus intellect would be a 9.
Okay, cool. On a 7 to 9, you're going to get some of the information that you wanted. You can ask me a question. I'm going to give you a true answer, but I don't have to give you a full answer.
What rumor about Finnegan did I hear at breakfast this morning?
Yes, very good. So the rumor that you heard about Finnegan at breakfast was that she has not been seen recently. She did not come back to the Hufflepuff common room last night.
That's an interesting piece of information. Yeah, Curtis whispers back and says, yeah, I heard she went out and just didn't come back, but I didn't hear anything beyond that.
Well, she's still not back. All right, she didn't show up to any of her other classes. Nothing.
Maybe they're just looking in the wrong places. I mean, maybe we have to think like a Finnegan to find a Finnegan.
Yeah, maybe. Well, what do you think? Where would she go?
If I were Finnegan or I was looking for a Finnegan, I would start in her dorm and see if we had any evidence there.
Oh, yeah, that's smart. Can't get into the girls' dorms, though. Or at least we're not allowed to.
Well, that's because you have to get smart enough to charm your way in.
Curtis. Listen, this is why you're the one always in charge here. All right, I can't make heads or tails of this stuff.
You just gotta tell the guards the paintings the right questions, right? It's a painting that guards that particular dorm, right?
We'll say yes, certainly.
You just have to know how to tap into what they're thinking and entertain them, and then they'll do whatever you ask them to.
Yeah, I guess so.
And as you are having this discussion with Curtis, Professor Dubois looks up and addresses you. Mr. Scanlon.
Yes, sir?
Yes, hello. Are you having an interesting conversation over there? I'm trying to tell you about boggarts. It's a very serious topic.
Oh, it's incredibly serious. I was studying it ahead of time so I could keep up with the lesson. I was very concerned about falling behind.
Oh, very well. Well, then, if you know so much about boggarts already, I don't suppose you'd mind telling me which charm is most effective against them.
Now, is this a gain knowledge roll or get what you seek when I randomly open the book to the right page?
I would like you to make a get what you seek roll. The way the get what you seek rolls work are if you are being straightforward, you can use bravery. If you are being tricky, you're going to use cunning. So are you attempting to be straightforward about the way you're getting this information, or are you going to pull some kind of trick?
I think that this is Curtis's favorite class, and when he says he's been reading ahead, he has earnestly been reading ahead. So I think I would make the argument this is a bravery roll.
Okay, I absolutely accept that argument. And do keep in mind, if this is your favorite class, you're going to get a +1 on that bravery roll.
So that's 11.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so you get what you wanted. No problem. And of course, you quickly flip your Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook, and lo and behold, the Boggarts page. What you've got there is, of course, that the most effective charm against a Boggart is the ridiculous charm.
Well, sir, it's the ridiculous charm. That is the most effective defense against the Boggart. I mean, that was what stood out most clear to me last night when I was studying.
Yes, of course. Well, clearly you've been doing your reading, Scanlan. Very good. 5 points to Hufflepuff. And at this point, as the professor turns back to the rest of the class, seemingly satisfied, and you've won 5 points for your house, which is pretty good, your gaze happens to drift over to the door to the classroom. Now, it's closed, but there's a window in the door, and you just catch a little glimpse of a figure moving quickly past that doorway. And you know who it looks like? It looks like Arabella Finnegan.
What? What a twist!
Yeah, what do you want to do?
Oh, definitely. This is the moment where I want to sneak off and figure out what's going on. I mean, I was excited to charm my way in, but I can also use that charisma just talking to her face to face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curtis is going to look up at the professor and ask politely, Sir, thank you so much for the points to my house, but do you mind if I just step out for a moment?
I think I'm going to ask for another Get What You Seek roll for this. So this one, however, is going to be with cunning, because you're trying to trick your way out of class here.
It's true, and that's not my best stat. So that's a 7.
Okay, so you get what you wanted, but...
The professor's definitely suspicious.
Yeah, okay. Professor Dubois kind of narrows his eyes at you. Why do you need to be excused exactly, Scanlan?
Breakfast just really isn't sitting that well with me this morning. It's just, I don't know, maybe something went down the wrong way. Just a little anxious, a little nervous, that sort of thing.
Very well, but please hurry back. I'll have a timer on. He reaches behind him, and there's a small hourglass on his desk, and he's going to flip it. Looks like you have about 10 minutes.
Good enough.
And you are excused from class. What do you do?
Curtis is going to slip out of the classroom, do a quick check down both sides of the hall. Is it clear where Finnegan went?
Yeah, so as you glance to your right, you glance to your left, and off to your left, the hall bends around off to the right, and you just catch a glimpse of some students' robes just going around the corner of the hallway. And you guess that's probably Finnegan.
Does this sound like the right moment for a hide-and-sneak roll?
I think it is definitely the right moment for a hide-and-sneak roll. Let's see how that goes, because there's definitely you're not supposed to be out of class right now. You have an excuse, but there's faculty walking around. If they find you, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to really startle Finnegan that much coming up from behind. 7.
Great. So if you could pick one option from the 7 to 9 list for hide and sneak, please.
Someone or something knows you're here.
Okay. So is your goal to hide and sneak from Finnegan, who you're trailing, or from somebody who might find you out in the hallway, or both?
I think Curtis is mostly focused on not getting noticed by Finnegan.
Okay. how this is going to go is you start sneaking down the hall and you get to that corner, poke your head around, and there's Finnegan. It's definitely her. She is standing in the hallway, and as you poke your head around, she turns her head, and you're able to quickly duck back around the corner. But she knows somebody's following her, and you hear her around the corner. She picks up her pace. You hear her footsteps on the flagstones pick up their pace as she hurries away down the corridor. What are you going to do?
If she is going to try to run away, maybe sneaking isn't really the best option. Curtis is just going to go right head first into this, go around the corner, and call out Finnegan's name.
Ooh,
and say,
okay.
Finnegan, I didn't see you last night. Where have you been?
Oh no, Curtis. I haven't been anywhere. I didn't expect to see you here.
The other people in the house, they've said you didn't come back to the dorms last night.
Oh, I'm sorry, Curtis. I can't tell you. There's something. I don't.
As she is sort of standing in the middle of the hall and stammering, the lights around you dim. It was in the afternoon a second ago, but now if you look out the windows in this hallway, it looks like it's nighttime. There's this sort of diffuse, silvery moonlight that is illuminating the hallway now, all of the sudden. As Finnegan is stammering there, you see behind her these shadows start to creep along the floor towards her. There's 3 of them. They might be humanoid in nature. They might not be. You can't quite tell, but they are starting to creep out towards her and towards you. What do you do?
I have to remember what I studied in class. I was studying ahead of time.
Yeah.
If I have shadows using light, that seems like a good place to start right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you are trying to cast a Lumos spell.
That definitely sounds like what I'm trying to do.
Fantastic.
So we're going to cast some magic. Let's not talk about my magic stat.
All right.
So that's a 6.
Ooh, all right. Well, not relevant for this brief playthrough, but if you would like to, please mark a point of experience for me.
Hooray.
And I get to make, if I want, a hard move. This is where we're going to bring up the condition system. So you see these shadows rushing towards you and rushing towards Arabella Finnegan, and you are paralyzed with fear. You've never seen anything like this. I'm going to ask you to take the scared condition, please.
Oh, definitely. Reading about this stuff in a book is one thing and being an enthusiast is another, but actually experiencing it is terrifying.
Right.
And Curtis definitely pulls out his wand and then it's like completely loses his train of thought and the wand drops to the ground. He's not able to cast that spell.
Yeah, so these shadows, they rush up in and around Arabella Finnegan, and they sort of start to wreathe themselves around her and around her body, and she doesn't say anything. She just looks at you, Curtis, with this sort of desperate, pleading look in her eyes. What do you do?
She's not doing anything right now, so I can't necessarily help out a narrator character if she's not doing anything.
How would you help her?
Well, I think there is an interesting argument to be made for unique applications of spells and charms. Curtis has recently learned a disarming charm. He wonders to himself, could you use the disarming spell to disarm the shadows around Finnegan in a way to defend her in an abstract way?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and I want to see how it goes. Tell me what it looks like as Curtis starts to cast this disarming charm, and give me a roll to help someone.
So there's definitely a moment of absolute lockup, that bystander syndrome, unable to do anything. And then Curtis reaches down and grabs the wand and thinks of something he picked up in class the other day about disarming and sort of disarming weapons. And maybe you could consider shadows a weapon, or at least they're trying to wrap themselves around her. So maybe he could get them to shove off, as it were.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. Give me a roll plus your loyalty.
So that was an 11.
Oh, absolutely. Tell me what it looks like as Curtis successfully casts this disarming charm and banishes these shadows.
So it's like imagining disarming someone magically from a distance where you would expect their weapon to fly off and go safely away from the attacker. In this case, these shadows wave for a moment and then they blow apart, like peeling off of Finnegan and away from the floor and into sort of the corners of the room where they disappear into the shadows that were already naturally occurring.
Very, very cool. Yeah, and as that happens, the lighting in the room returns to normal. It sort of fades back into that daylight that you had before. And Arabella, her shoulders just drop like a foot with relief. And she rushes towards you and says, "Oh, Curtis, thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here, but I'm sorry." And she wraps her arms around you, Curtis.
Is she older than me?
You are.
What year is she? I'm second year.
She's also a second year. You're the same age. She wraps her arms around you. How does Curtis react to that briefly?
So for all of his talk about, oh, we should go charm our way in, he's a little bit awkward and flustered. He tries to wrap his arms back like it's a comforting thing, like nothing scandalous.
Of course not.
Incredibly awkward young teenage boy.
Yes, absolutely. And as you do that, Arabella, Finnegan says to you,
Thank you, but I'm sorry, Curtis.
she slowly, in your arms, just fades away into nothing. And Curtis, you're left standing there alone in this empty hallway in Hogwarts, kind of looking around. There's nobody else there. That's where we're going to leave it.
Deeply concerned that was longer than 10 minutes.
Yes, you may have some trouble when you return to class. If you would like, we can briefly try out a short version of the mystery question system here.
Okay, and so walk us through that quickly. How do the mystery questions work?
Yeah, basically what I would do at this point is we've come to the end of the scene. I am going to open it up to the players, in this case, Rach, this is you, and say, okay, so have we come across any new mysteries?
Yes, we have definitely come across a couple mysteries.
What are the mysteries that we have? What are the questions that our characters have at the end of this scene?
So we have, of course, the big question of where did Finnegan fade to?
Right. Any others?
What were the shadow creatures?
Absolutely.
Where did Finnegan go last night?
Yeah.
I think those are the three big ones that are off the top of my head.
Sure. Okay, so we have, at this point, we would have on our mystery sheet written down, where did Finnegan fade to? What are the shadow creatures? And where did Finnegan go last night? Then I would basically throw it back to you as the player and say, where do you want to go next? What's the next scene? What do we think that is? In the next scene, we might get answers to some of those questions. We might get more questions, but as we did, we would start to cross those off the list and go forward and try to figure out what's going on here at Hogwarts.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining me today, David, to talk about Hogwarts and indulge in the fanficky AP we just did.
Absolutely.
If people want to follow more of your work, where can they find you online?
The big thing is, of course, the game. I probably should have mentioned this at the top. The game is completely free to download. It will always be forever, and it is available at hwrpg.net. So if you go over there, you can get a bit more info on the game. Some of the game rules are up online. There's some online resources for while you're playing the game. I have a link to a Spotify playlist with all the movie soundtracks that you can put on in the background while you're playing. Get some real thematic energy going there. You can also, on the site, sign up for a mailing list that I've got going, which is just going to be infrequent updates about the game. You know, if I put out a new version, if I bring it to any conventions. I do have some coming up, which I don't have, locked in yet, which is why I cannot announce them on the show, but if you sign up for the email list, you can get information about when I'm going to be running the game at various cons, that kind of thing, and future projects as I start to develop those. Still very much interested in Powered by the Apocalypse, and I got some things in the pipeline that I'm going to be working on that I'm pretty excited to share with people when they come out. So that, again, is hwrpg.net. My only real public social media is my Instagram, which is david.brunellbrutman, BRUNELLBRUTMAN. And over there, you can see some of my illustration and design work and pictures of my face. And sometimes I'm going to post stuff about the game and game art and that kind of thing. And then the only other place that I am on the internet is davidbrunellbrutman.com, which is my portfolio website and sort of the center for all my various projects. But again, most important one that you're going to want to know about, hwrpg.net to download the game for free.
Fabulous. And thank you again for coming on today.
Yeah, Rich, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to be on. Again, love the show. Huge fan of what you do. You've created an amazing resource for people who are interested in Powered by the Apocalypse games, you and Rich, and I'm just totally thrilled to have had the chance to come on.
No, we appreciate the positive feedback.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hi listeners, I want to tell you about the Farrier's Bellows, the newest member of the Gauntlet family of podcasts. The Farrier's Bellows is hosted by Diana and Zach W. and is produced by Zach B. It's a sister podcast to Fear of a Black Dragon focused on story games. Each episode, the hosts do a detailed review of a story game they have played, discuss separate topics inspired by that game, and offer media resources to inspire your gameplay. Games that have been covered so far on the Farrier's Bellows include Inspectors, Cyrun, Kagematsu, Dread, Grey Ranks, Witch, The Road to Lindisfarne, Don't Walk in Winter Wood, and Dogs in the Vineyard. Importantly, the Farrier's Bellows covers many of the games that originated out of the indie game design movement of the early aughts. These games are the foundation on which much of the modern indie scene is built, and Zach and Diana are excited to help a new generation of players discover them. Please check out all of our podcasts, including the Farrier's Bellows, at gauntlet-rpg.com. And if you love the Gauntlet Network's particular mix of engaging discussion and accessible listening, please consider supporting us on Patreon. We're at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.